She betrayed and jailed her wealthy husband and sold his only mansion for $1 million. But 3 months later, her son taught her a lesson. Imagine a woman with everything: wealth, power, and a perfect life, but behind closed doors, her jealousy and fear of losing it all drive her to a shocking betrayal. Anna, a woman who would do anything to maintain control, falsely accuses her husband of a crime he didn't commit, sends him to prison, and takes everything he worked for: his house, his car, and his reputation. But there's one thing she didn't plan for her own son: uncovering the devastating truth and deciding to expose her. What happens when the one person you trust most turns against you? Watch the full video to discover. Anna stood by the window of their large estate in Willow Creek, gazing out at the sprawling grounds below. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the perfectly manicured lawns. At 35, she had everything most women could dream of: a beautiful home, designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and a loving husband, Ethan, who was successful beyond measure. Ethan, 45, was a businessman with a reputation for excellence. He had worked tirelessly to build their luxurious life, and Anna often boasted about their perfect family. On the surface, everything seemed flawless. But as the months passed, Anna began to feel a strange unease growing within her. Ethan was always busy: meetings, phone calls, business trips, but it wasn't just his work schedule that bothered her. Little things started to niggle at her: the late-night calls he always took in another room, the way he was spending more time away from home, and how distant he had become. Anna, known for her beauty and charm, had always been the center of attention in their marriage. But recently, she felt like she was losing her husband to something or someone. She tried to brush off the feeling, but it only grew stronger with time. Deep down, she knew something was off. Could Ethan be seeing someone else? Could he be betraying her? She told herself it was just a phase, a temporary blip in their otherwise perfect marriage, but the doubt gnawed at her. The fear of losing everything she had built began to overtake her thoughts. Anna prided herself on her control over her life, and the idea that Ethan might be pulling away from her drove her to a place she never thought she'd go. Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The suspicion that her husband was hiding something consumed her every thought. She was used to being in control, but now it felt as if everything was slipping through her fingers. Ethan's sudden secrecy had her spiraling into paranoia. He would come home late, smelling faintly of expensive cologne, and avoided eye contact during conversations. There was always an excuse for his absences: a late meeting, an urgent call with a business partner, or a last-minute dinner with colleagues. But Anna wasn't blind. She could sense something more, something that went beyond work. Her insecurities, long buried beneath her facade of wealth and success, started to rise to the surface. She had always been confident, proud of her life and achievements. But now, she felt betrayed. Ethan, the man who had once showered her with love and affection, seemed like a stranger. What if he was seeing someone else? What if all these late nights were a cover for infidelity? Unable to resist the urge to uncover the truth, Anna decided to take matters into her own hands. She hired a private investigator. The idea of someone spying on her husband made her uneasy, but her need to know outweighed her hesitation. The investigator's task was simple: follow Ethan, track his movements, and gather evidence of any wrongdoing. Anna didn't want to entertain the possibility that Ethan could be innocent. She had already made up her mind that something was going on. A few days later, the investigator delivered the report. There were no signs of Ethan meeting other women, no secret rendezvous, and no suspicious behavior. But one detail stood out. He had been meeting a business associate, a woman named Claire, on several occasions. The meetings were always during the day in public places like cafes and restaurants. The investigator noted that they appeared to have a professional relationship, with no evidence of romance. Anna felt a mix of relief and frustration. There was no concrete evidence of infidelity, yet she couldn't shake the unease in her gut. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and now they were growing into something uncontrollable. Despite the lack of hard evidence, Anna's jealousy spiraled into something more dangerous. Her suspicions, once quiet whispers in the back of her mind, now consumed her every moment. The nagging feeling that Ethan was hiding something refused to fade, and her fear of losing him grew. She couldn't stand the idea of being left behind, discarded for someone else. The report from the investigator only fueled her paranoia. The thought of Ethan laughing with Claire over lunch or discussing business over coffee drove Anna to the brink of madness. In her anger and desperation, Anna made a decision that would change everything. She fabricated a story, accusing Ethan of financial fraud and embezzling funds from his company. She had no proof, no reason to believe he was guilty, but she was blinded by her jealousy. The accusations were serious, and she knew they would get his attention. It wasn't just about hurting him anymore, it was about controlling the narrative and making him pay for the pain she felt. Anna spread strategically placed lies and manipulated the authorities into arresting Ethan. She knew that once he was behind bars, the world would see her as the victim, the wronged wife. With him out of the picture, she could take everything, the house, the car, and all the wealth he had accumulated. When the police came for Ethan in the middle of the night, Anna stood silently as her husband was taken away in handcuffs. A strange mix of triumph and guilt washed over her, but she justified it as necessary. This was the price he had to pay for betraying her, or so she believed. The house was now hers, the car parked securely in the driveway, and the bank accounts under her control. Anna moved on as though nothing had changed, reveling in her newfound power. But deep within, she underestimated one crucial factor: their 13-year-old son, David, who had been watching everything unfold. David had always been perceptive, and he noticed the shifts at home. He missed his father deeply, and couldn't understand why his mother seemed so indifferent to his absence. Anna had told him it was a complicated legal issue, urging him to focus on school. But David wasn't naive. Her rehearsed answers only deepened his suspicions. Determined to find the truth, David began investigating. One day, while Anna was out, he searched her office. Among her documents, he found evidence of her betrayal, legal papers showing she had sold the house, the car, and withdrawn large sums from family accounts. David's hands shook as he realized the extent of her deceit. David couldn't stay silent. With the help of a lawyer, he began to gather evidence to expose Anna's lies. Though he was young, his resolve was unwavering. Confronting his mother became inevitable, and one fateful evening, he laid the evidence before her. "Why, Mom?" David asked, his voice steady despite the anger in his eyes. "How could you do this to Dad?" Anna's face paled as she looked at the documents. For the first time, her confidence wavered. She tried to explain, but there were no words to justify her actions. David didn't wait for her excuses. "I'm not letting you get away with this," he said firmly. Anna's breath caught in her throat as she watched her son storm out of the room, the stack of damning documents clutched in his small but determined hands. She felt a flicker of panic for the first time in months. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. David, her son, had turned against her. The days that followed were tense. David, armed with the evidence, sought out his father's lawyer, Mr. Bennett, a man who had always been loyal to Ethan. Though skeptical of a child's claims, Mr. Bennett couldn't ignore the meticulous documentation David presented. The boy had gathered bank statements, falsified accusations, and records of Anna's manipulation. It was undeniable proof of Ethan's innocence and Anna's betrayal. 3 months after being imprisoned, Ethan sat in the dim light of his cell, his mind racing. The betrayal by the woman he loved had been a blow he couldn't comprehend. He had replayed their last moments together over and over, trying to understand how it had come to this. But his despair turned to hope when he received an unexpected visitor. "David." "Dad," the boy whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "I know the truth now. I'm so sorry it took me this long to figure it out. But I'm going to fix this." Ethan's heart swelled with pride and sorrow. Despite his young age, David was stepping into the role of protector, a position Ethan had always held for him. "You're so brave, son," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "But be careful. Your mother, she's not who we thought she was." With Mr. Bennett's help, David filed an appeal on Ethan's behalf, using the new evidence to dismantle the charges against him. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but with the weight of the truth on their side, they gained momentum. Public opinion began to shift as the truth about Anna's actions came to light. Meanwhile, Anna's once perfect life started to crumble. The media caught wind of the scandal, and the whispers of her betrayal turned into a public outcry. Friends and associates distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with her deceit. The luxurious lifestyle she had worked so hard to protect became a prison of isolation. David's confrontation haunted her. She had always prided herself on being a devoted mother, but her own son had become her accuser. The shame of her actions weighed heavily on her, and for the first time, she began to question the choices she had made. The courtroom was packed the day Ethan's case was reopened. Anna sat in the gallery, her once pristine appearance now marred by sleepless nights and stress. Ethan, now a shadow of his former self but radiating quiet dignity, took the stand. His defense, bolstered by David's evidence, painted a clear picture of his innocence and Anna's betrayal. When it was Anna's turn to testify, she faltered. The weight of her lies was too much to bear. Under cross-examination, she broke down, admitting to fabricating the accusations against Ethan out of jealousy and fear. The judge's verdict was swift. Ethan was exonerated, and Anna was charged with perjury, fraud, and malicious prosecution. The court ordered her to forfeit her ill-gotten gains, including the money from the sale of the house, and sentenced her to community service and rehabilitation instead of prison. Partly due to David's plea for leniency, with his name cleared, Ethan decided to focus on rebuilding his life. The betrayal had scarred him, but his son's unwavering loyalty reminded him of what truly mattered. He declined to press additional charges against Anna, choosing instead to prioritize David's well-being. David, though still grappling with the fallout, found solace in the renewed bond with his father. Together they moved into a modest home, far from the grandeur of their past but rich in love and trust. Ethan started a new business, one that prioritized honesty and integrity, while David became his greatest supporter. Anna, left to face the consequences of her actions, began a journey of self-reflection. Community service humbled her, and therapy forced her to confront the insecurities that had driven her to such extremes. Though estranged from Ethan and David, she vowed to rebuild herself into someone worthy of their forgiveness. Years later, David stood at his father's side as Ethan was honored for his contributions to the community. The young boy who had once exposed his mother's lies had grown into a confident, compassionate young man. As they looked out over the crowd, Ethan placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Ethan said. David nodded, a smile breaking across his face. "We sure have, Dad." And in that moment, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they could face them together, stronger than ever.